Hello, hope everybody's doing well. So as requested, here is a video talking about some active reading tips. I know we've discussed some of these in class already, but this is a great little place to come back whenever you feel like you're struggling a little bit and need some pointers to help you get moving again and feel like you're retaining the material that you are engaging with. So with active reading, engagement really is what we're looking for, ways to engage with the text rather than passively just looking at it, letting the words slide across your brain and not retaining anything. We want to make sure that we are paying attention and that we are retaining that material. So here are a few strategies that can be helpful whenever you need a little more assistance with being sure that you're engaging and staying involved with your text. So first of all, one of my favorites is to read out loud. This is especially helpful when you are tired, when you have to keep going. You can read out loud. Reading out loud forces you to process the text in order to speak it, and you also hear yourself, and it'll keep you awake. Don't do it at the library, though. You have to be quiet there. Another strategy I like a lot is to annotate, and you've heard me talk about this in class a good bit. So with annotating, annotating can be very personal. I'm not here to tell you, here's exactly how you should do it. But, jot some ideas in the margins if you are one who can mark up your books. I mark up a lot of books, but I understand that's not for everybody. Sometimes we're borrowing from the library or a friend. Sometimes we're renting our textbooks and we want to return them. So using some small Post-it flags can be an option. Using a notebook on the side or using some slips of paper that you stick in the book in important spots can be one way to do it. Highlighting can be helpful unless you overdo it and then you end up only being able to pay attention to the one sentence on the page that's not highlighted. So think about what works for you. Are you a person who likes a system of little symbols to go back to? Do you want comments? I sometimes will put short questions, short impressions, or stars by something that I know I want to go back to. In classes where you're going to need to write essays on the things that you read, having those notes in the margin can be incredibly helpful to come back to. You can also put some question marks down so that you know what you need to discuss in class, what you need to ask your instructor about, etc. Paraphrasing and summarizing is another great thing to do. So if you're a note taker in a notebook, trying to take the author's ideas and put them in your own words or summarize down to the main ideas can be a great way to make yourself sort of a study guide and also to make sure that you really understand what's going on. For you to paraphrase something, for you to take the writer's idea and put it truly in your own words, you have to understand it. So this is a good tool to figure out when you don't quite understand something. Sometimes we fool ourselves and we're like, yeah, I got the hang of this. And then we go to a class discussion, we have to talk about it. And suddenly we can't quite get that back. So this is a good way to test yourself. It's also a nice thing to do if you're going to take breaks in your reading, which I really recommend. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then you can come back to where you left off without having to reread to catch up and remind yourself, jog your memory, and then move forward. Another thing I like to do, and this can be helpful with processes or history, is to do an outline. So going through and outlining the major points from the text that I'm reading. We'll also tell students to do this when they're working on organization in their own essays. I call it reverse outlining because instead of outlining from the beginning, making yourself a plan, you're looking back at what you wrote and then making the outline from what's actually there. And so while it's a good writing technique, it's a great reading technique too, because then again, you have your little study guide there. You have your signposts. This is another helpful thing if you're going to take breaks. Taking breaks is incredibly important with your schoolwork, with any academic enterprise, with really anything you ever do. I know that we can't always do that, whether it's work constraints, family constraints, whatever. Sometimes we just have to power through the couple hours block we have, but it's really helpful to take some time to process the information you've taken in, especially if it's something that's really mentally taxing. This is also an effective strategy when you're writing, when you're creating, to do some work and then give yourself a few minutes to go do something that lets your brain rest. And you know, you've probably had the experience of coming up with really good ideas or coming up with the solution to a problem when you've stepped away and have gone for a walk or gone to wash some dishes or fold some laundry or do some work outside. Sometimes that break is really what your brain needs in order to keep on going and keep processing. And we learn better when we're fresh. So if you can take some time away and then come back to it, you may be surprised at how much more efficient your reading and study sessions are. It's often helpful too to talk out the information with someone, even if they don't really have an understanding of it or a better understanding than you. If you can engage somebody to talk about the ideas, you're processing that information again, and a lot of times you can work out the questions you have or the misunderstandings. This is another one of those reading strategies that works well in writing. A lot of the most productive tutoring sessions I've had with students are when we're just talking about it. When I say we, it's usually the student talking. They need a sounding board. They need somebody to say, "Oh, what do you think about that?" And by talking through it, again, you're processing it, you're coming up with new ideas, you're making new connections. The other important thing is to actually get started, to actually do it. Sometimes with our schoolwork, it's easy to have a great sense of dread, and we don't want to get started because it feels so insurmountable. But just reading a couple pages, or just maybe skimming the text first and getting a feel for how it's laid out, is one step in the right direction. So make sure that you actually get started and use the tools. Students will say, "Oh, I'm not really a great critical reader." You get that way by practice. So even reading outside of school helps you be a better reader and a better writer, and to read and think more critically. So read out loud, annotate, paraphrase and summarize, outline, take breaks, talk it out with someone, get started, and use these tools. And hopefully that will help you feel a little bit better as you work through your readings this semester and beyond.